Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Kate Bulkley. Welcome. I'm glad to see you all here. This is the branded entertainment panel. Many of you may know that there was a branded entertainment summit this morning that went on for a couple of hours, and we've picked the creme de la creme from that group to come and talk to us here and sort of talk about some of the things that came up this morning and also give you their views on where branded entertainment is going. As most of you know, obviously branded entertainment is still a small part of the whole advertising pie, but it's a growing part and it's a very interesting part. And certainly as we start getting fragmented platforms and distribution media, we're seeing much more of it, certainly on the web and things like that. If you don't know me, I'm Kate Bulkley. I'm a journalist and I'm basically here to moderate the session. And we will have Q&A, so please keep your questions, get your questions organized, and I'll try to make time for them at the end. One thing I will say is that this is, I know they're all white men, all right, but it's a very good group in the sense that it is, despite the fact that they're all white men, and a lot of them have blue and white shirts on, I might add. They do represent a certain cross section of the industry, which I think is really important. Now I'm gonna very quickly introduce them so that you know who you're talking to. On the far side, we have Dominique Delport. Dominique Delport is the CEO of Havas Media in France. Next to him, we have Marcus Vinton. Marcus Vinton is founder and chief executive officer of something called Publicis Entertainment. It's actually only about a year old, but it's obviously part of Publicis Group. Next to him, we have Doug Scott. Doug Scott is the president of Ogilvy Entertainment. Next to him, we have Cameron Deeth. Cameron Deeth is senior vice president and general manager of NBC Universal Digital Studio USA, which will soon be called Comcast. Sorry. That was a joke. If the deal goes through. Cameron and then next to Cameron we have Bob Friedman, who many of you know. He is the president of media and entertainment for Radical Media, and we'll talk about that in a second because Radical Media is now part of Fremantle Media. And last but not least, next to me we have Peter Tortorici, and Peter Tortorici is president of Group M Entertainment, which is obviously a holding company for a lot of media agencies. So that's our panel. As I say, it's a very high-powered panel indeed. What I'm going to do is ask a few questions, get the guys to talk a little bit, and then we will open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to start actually with Bob. And the reason I'm going to start with Bob Friedman is most of us in this room have now read the news that Radical Media was bought, or 60%, I should say, of Radical Media was bought by Fremantle Media yesterday. It was announced yesterday. And this is an interesting thing to have happened, and if you're going to turn that phone off, that'd be great. It was an interesting thing to have happened because it sort of shows how these separate parts of the industry, this is a production company, a distribution company getting together with someone who's much more in the branded entertainment and comes from the advertising side. So Bob, can I just start with you? Why, what is this going to do to help you do what you do, if you see what I mean? Why is being part of Fremantle important to Radical Media?
Sure. I think clearly this was a logical next step for us, and probably a logical next step for Fremantle with the foresight that they had, given what's going on in the marketplace. And I don't think it's, to be perfectly frank, that it's going to stop with these kinds of relationships. We're living in a media world right now with a significant amount of clutter, in addition to the disaggregation that's going on. And if you take a look at the way in which people are using media, they're using it in a very different way, not just the numbers that we all recite and quote about 40% of viewers are time shifting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The way in which you use different platforms to reach audiences are changing. And it's funny, even if I think about the four boxes of technology, the radio, the TV set, the computer, and the telephone, very much in the world that we're all living in, they're sharing their capabilities very differently than they were even 5 years ago. So it's not only the consumer, it's really what's going on with the technology. So it's practically impossible if you don't really think about reaching a targeted audience by using multiple media. It's funny, I was, this morning when we were talking, I was thinking about when I was first here, it was in the early 1980s, and I was working at MTV at the time in the startup group. And I was thinking about how cool it was. There were two cable channels. There was CNN, there was MTV, there was a little bit of HBO that had just gone on the Bird in 1979. And we were really proud when we launched in New York because we had 30 or 40 million homes. And there were literally 3 channels. And today, there are 150 channels, delivering 90 million homes probably each. And I'm not just talking about the digital channels, I'm also talking about the analog channels. So the question now is really, how do you use in this targeted universe various media to sort of cut through and reach your desired audience? And I think that's the challenge. And with what's going on in the marketplace today, license fees are coming down, production costs are going up, the cost of promotion there are a lot of great ideas that are never even seen in the marketplace. And really there are only 2 groups left that have any cash. It's the consumers and all of us, assuming that we like the content that we do see, and the advertisers or the partners, like Peter over here and Doug and a few others with whom we really try to partner to help their clients cut through.
So working together with Fremantle is going to allow you to do what that you couldn't do before?
Well, certainly from our side, and a marriage has to be a great marriage on both sides, and certainly on our side to achieve or take advantage of the global reach that they have. Mm-hmm. In addition, when I talk about multi-platform entertainment or distribution, I'm talking about how wonderful it is to also have access to a licensing group globally around the world to either exploit existing brands or, interestingly enough, as you've seen, from the Fremantle guys, to develop new brands. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot easier to do when you're living under the same roof, so to speak. Though clearly, from their standpoint, I think they saw the kind of things that we did and were buying us for really what we were all about, and vice versa. We've had a relationship with Fremantle for the last 4 years in terms of distribution.
So let me ask you this, Peter. Thank you, Bob. That was interesting. Peter, when you look at this, you run Group M, a lot of media agencies all under one roof. Do you see what Bob has done with Fremantle as a threat or an opportunity? Because in some ways, he's taking away business that you would be doing. That's what media agencies do.
Well, first of all, let me correct the title. I'm not the president of Group M.
Sorry, Group M Entertainment.
Erwin Gottlieb, who is my boss, he runs Group M. I run the much smaller little, like boutique business called Group M Entertainment. And the alphabet soup of WPP, Group M, and all this basically exists to create client advantage. That's what we're there for. If we don't confer a benefit to clients, we don't have a reason for being. So the core business, the core practice of the media agency is to come up with strategic plans and implement them that help corporate advertisers accomplish a marketing objective. So our founding principle was that whatever it is we do has to in some way benefit our clients in a substantial measure. And Group M Entertainment tries to organize what they do in this both branded entertainment space through the agencies, and also seeks to create properties through our own investment and ways that we can collateralize that as a media company so that we can, again, give our clients an advantage in being sponsors to those properties, but also work with a lot of other partners in the process of doing both of those things. Radical has always been a partner and will continue to be a partner. Fremantle has been a partner, will continue to be a partner. But every one of these guys on this panel, maybe with the exception of us, since we're directly in the same space, but I'm sure we can even find ways to share there. We're all in that same unhappy and uncomfortable place of being both competitors and also allies and collaborators, depending upon the situation. In a 21st century reality, you have to approach each challenge on its own individual challenge and merits, its own individual characteristics, and you can't go into anything blindly assuming that because you played that position yesterday, you're going to play that position today. It has to be rethought and re-examined freshly. We were talking this morning about the fact that we used to live, those of us like Bobby and I who have been around here for a long time, in a fairly comfortable world. We knew where advertisers belonged. They belonged in the empty spaces in between content. And whatever it is they had to say, they said through their advertising agency. And it had nothing to do with anything that we, who were in the creative business, had to do. And now that line has been crossed, not because, gee, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but because of the economic necessity of finding ways of continuing to support what we do. And one of the things that I think we all have to recognize is that this is not a new sum of money that's been entered into the equation. Marketers aren't spending more money. They're just rearranging how they're spending money to try to achieve higher levels of effectiveness. So for producers, for networks, for agencies, all of us are working in that same environment of how do we collaborate together to deliver higher value to clients? Because if we don't, then we're not in the space.
It really sums it up. Now, Dominique, let me just go to you, since, as Peter says, in some ways you compete with him directly. Havas Media is interesting because you've actually started up your own production studio, haven't you? So you're doing both the sort of the agency thing, and you're also doing the creative thing. How did that work? I mean, you've got 50 people, I think you said this morning, that are working for you now.
Yes, some of them are with us today. It's on 20 teams. Yeah, in fact, we don't want to be a full service, and we absolutely have no arrogance in the way we push our business and say, you need to work also with our production team. But in fact, we, in a media agency, are focused on delivery end-to-end. Mm-hmm. And when Peter talked about that effectiveness in entertainment business, it means that we need to be sure that our idea, creative or media ideas, are strong, clever, targeted, relevant, but also execution and implementation will be with the same standard. So we need to raise the bar even on production side. And of course, we belong to a group where creative agencies are very strong, well-known like BTC, EuroSCG, and so on. So we don't want to compete with our brothers within the group. But for non-advertising production, there is an empty space. And when 3 years ago, from Havas Entertainment and Emmy Award-winning company, we tried to push a bit further and to produce our own content for TV channels. So without brands, because we knew that we had first to be credible in this business, and so to figure out that we could obtain and achieve huge ratings and great audience performance. Mm-hmm. So we have done 50 current affairs in the last 16 months for the major TV channels. And then there was the Evian baby roller case that we presented in the last MIP. And that Evian baby roller was not only the Guinness Book record advertising from BTC, 160 million views on the internet, but also a 52-minute current affair magazine that has been released in more than 25 channels all over the world.
I think everyone's seen this, right? It was
so
the babies on the skates, the babies on the roller skates, you know, and they were skating around. It was quite a, if you haven't seen it, you must go see it.
Yeah.
But what was interesting,
and you're live young. Yeah.
But what was interesting about that is you took the risk to make that content before you actually had Evian behind you, didn't you? I mean, how does that work? I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of it.
You start by saying that it was still a little business. Uh-huh. So we have no metrics like GRP bombings, push ads. You're going to generate sales. So we sometimes need to be risky-takey and on that matter, but also sometimes on product placement. Tomorrow, for all the people that are in France today, Despicable Me will be released on the French theater. And it has been produced entirely in France by MacGuff, a CGI studio and company. And we tried to put a French Gallic retailer, Auchan, one of the largest in the world, despite, in that CGI movie. And it's just amazing. It works. And for all the people leaving the theaters, oh my God, it was an Hollywood movie with my very close to me retail brand. Mm-hmm. And another thing funny with Auchan, and it's tonight on the French public TV with Tel France, that you're going to see in the Plus Belle la Vie, one of the most important and well-known TV show in France, Life is So Easy. You're going to see people from the show ordering their home delivery system, and tomorrow, for the next show, they will be delivered. So it's absolutely, it could seem a funny thing, but you have to know that product placement was totally impossible in France and in Europe, and now it's less and less restrictive. So you need, for that new practices, to be convinced that it can generate leverage and more engagement for the brands and its consumers. So some conviction sell, that's our job. Mm-hmm.
Marcus, let me come to you. Marcus Vinton, you have you've created a new division in Publicis Entertainment. So in a way, you've got, you're creating media, you're creating its creative side. And you've done a lot on multi-platform. That was something we talked a lot about this morning, the importance of multi-platform. So talk a little bit about why that's important and how you've done that. I think it's with Renault.
Sure, Kate. Media fragmentation continues at an alarming rate. I think it's really simple for brands. All they need to do is have a relevant and engaging conversation with customers and prospects. Long-form entertainment gives us the opportunity of really having a much more immersive conversation. And I think there are some great opportunities through channel strategies. The natural extension, if we believe in AFP as a short-form piece, without clever distribution and applying some very strategic consumer touch points, it's just a piece of content floating in the atmosphere. I think if we move to series strands and start to strip content, a channel is a logical next step This also has the added advantage of being able to deploy media time. So brands can become a media owner literally overnight. That gives us the opportunity to co-create. We can manage co-production ventures and bring other brands who perhaps don't have the confidence really to look at network opportunities. We can co-create content with them, and we can monetize that as well.
I mean, Doug, when you look at that, you're at Ogilvy. Do you think that channels are the way forward? Do you think it's long-form content, or do you think it's web content, or is it all different, different things for different advertisers?
I actually see a world out there where we're channel agnostic. I don't necessarily believe the channels will exist. I think with the fragmentation that we're experiencing, there's a surplus of channels, there's a surplus of content, and with technology, which is disabling old business models and enabling new ones, getting better at being able to give us what we want, where we want it, and how we want it across multiple screens. The idea of a channel is more about what I need when I need it. So, there are a lot of suppliers out there right now, obviously Google being one that is mashing up tools with content in a very unique environment. The brand channel thing, at least in the United States, hasn't worked so well with Bud TV and a few other, brand channel launches. There's a window right now, obviously, with the video on demand marketplace, specifically, where branded content is finding its way onto those cable operating systems, and I think it's one of several distribution channels for a brand to be able to aggregate impressions, giving it greater value for that investment in content. But long term, I think we will all program our own channel, depending upon where we are in our life stage and with the products that we need or are interested in our lives. And it's going to be incumbent upon brands to continue to be really good storytellers, and then use technology and the engagement with that audience or the consumer to have a deeper dialogue and a deeper conversation.
Cameron, when you look at this, do you think we're in a transitional phase right now with branded entertainment? Marcus is making channels, Doug's making all kinds of different things, Havas Media's over there making all kinds of interesting, almost feature film type things. Are we in a transitional point with the kind of branded entertainment that we're seeing?
I think it is. I think it's very much still the wild, wild west, and there are no running rules, which can be extremely liberating at times and extremely frustrating at times. I think Peter talked a little bit about it this morning as well. We're cooperating at times with partners who we're competing with 5 minutes ago, and sort of that whole mashup of what the world looks like. I do think, though, that there's a higher quality bar being prescribed to branded entertainment content. I think there's a fear among content creators that we will do to branded entertainment what we as marketers did to email and just completely screw it up and really not respect that consumer touch point that we have today. So I think so long as content creators we can keep holding that bar high, then we'll continue to move further into the sort of everyday entertainment touch points that we have with consumers. And that's exciting from a scale standpoint, it's exciting from an impact standpoint, and from a revenue standpoint.
Peter, you talked this morning about sort of the risk-reward thing. In a way, to get into this, the brands and it seems to me the advertising agencies are quite risk-averse. So talk about that. How do we make stuff that's really good and bring them into making interesting, compelling content, have them take a risk, and yet not go against all the culture of the sort of the agency world?
Well, I think that you get to what people like to call tipping points or inflection points at the time at which it's no longer a risk to act, but more of a risk not to act. And we're at that point now where even the most conservative brand managers look at the power of what social networks are doing, look at the kind of robust relationship they're creating in digital media with their consumers, and also look at the trend data with regard to DVRs and see that they have to do different things in order to be able to maintain and deepen their relationship to their customers. So I think that part of the reason why the panel is here and why we're in a more robust business than we were 5 years ago is because we were at that inflection point where brands are saying, I've got to try new things, which is really helpful. But at the same point in time, again, there are so many different people that are part of this chain of value, all with very, very different perspectives about where they belong and what reward they should take from that experience. If you're a producer, your natural inclination is to say, well, look, I can make up that difference that I was getting in license fee with a brand. Well, yeah. Do you want distribution? Because if you want distribution, then that distribution is still running at a premium where that distributor is saying, well, wait a minute, I'm suffering erosion in terms of my revenues. I want to own those integration placements and all of those marketing rights, and I'll pay what I'll pay for a license fee, but I want to own those rights. Well, then the advertiser says, okay, so then what am I buying? Who's going to execute it? And who's delivering value to me? And who's covering my back? So if you look at that those are distinct challenges for every single person who's on this panel that have to get worked out situationally because, as one of the panelists was saying, there's no rule book. All of this is really a work in progress.
Bob, yeah.
It's funny because when we're talking about talent and all of us working together, no one can own all the talent. I mean, it doesn't happen in television. You can't own all the showrunners. You wouldn't want to. So no matter what, you can't do that. An idea doesn't really care whose it is. But the reason I think that branded content right now is so important is because no one has a choice but to participate and figure out how to do it. For example, it's interesting when you take a look at, who's playing in this space. I mean, this is a very fragile business right now, and it could get really, really messed up. But and it's not just the television business. I came out of the movie business at New Line for a decade, and I can tell you, when my budget on the second Austin Powers was cut by $30 million, I had no choice to find a promotional partner, which was Virgin Airlines and Branson, who put $25 million of P&A behind the second movie, though I got the credit. That's what opened that movie. And it was a foundation medium that was not television. It was outdoor for those of us who remember Urgent for a Virgin. But the days of sitting at a network, whether it's the 150 of them or whether it's at NBC, Mike Pilot at NBC, who runs ad sales, would love to sit there the way we all did and have someone walk in the door and say, like Irwin, if you don't spend an extra $30 million, forget it. So give me the above-the-line sponsorship for the Video Music Awards or for ER or whatever it is. Those days are over. The advertisers are insisting that we better integrate in. No one is happy about it, particularly the agencies and the media companies. It was a lot easier in older days. As a result, this business very quickly has to be a very credible creative business. And it never... Not to say that it wasn't ever a creative business, but that's who's going to get in this business. And 5 years from now, when we're sitting here, every one of the media companies is going to have some version of this, not just what people call integrated marketing. People and groups and companies that develop, produce, and distribute this branded content. Because if you're not along for that entire ride, even in a partnership with someone, it's very difficult to pull off.
So you're talking about, I'm going to bring Cameron in, talking about like what MTV did, MTV Scratch. In other words, they're having something in-house, right? I mean, Cameron, is that what you're, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to build on that and say, I think what's become interesting is branded content has moved from sort of the value add to the value we've seen over the past 12, 24 months, where we're now seeing the entertainment program that we're all creating actually being what's being promoted within media that they're buying versus buying the media and then let's tack on a couple of webisodes for shits and giggles at the end of it. And that's been a really interesting move. And so it has changed that conversation we're having with advertisers, and it's changed the conversation that sales needs to be able to have with our media partners as well, which is, to your point earlier, a seismic shift from where we were 3-4 years ago.
We this morning, another thing we talked about was how do you actually measure this? How do the brands actually know that they're getting what they want out of this? I mean, Dominique, do you want to talk about that? Is that?
I think that it's still the early beginning of brand content measurement. This morning, Peter was talking about In the Motherhood with Unilever and the fact that at that time there was no other communication, so it was easy to really understand what were the leverage created by that brilliant brand statement program. But mainly, there are much other communication action at the same time. So
let's just say what In the Motherhood was. You could just explain it, or you want to explain it? You can explain it to Peter. It's your property.
Well, it was a consumer engagement platform for mothers. It lived online and was powered by partnerships with Yahoo as well as between two brands, Unilever and Sprint Nextel. And what it featured were stories that were suggested by young moms that were then ultimately voted on by a community of moms and then brought to life in webisodes with really big Hollywood talent. Chelsea Handler, Jane McCarthy, Leah Remini. And ultimately, a series of 12 webisodes were created, and then it was ultimately licensed to ABC for a half-hour sitcom on broadcast network television. But what it was there to do was bring those two brands into community with their constituency in a very relevant, very direct way. And what the initial metric of measurement was how many video views can we get? So partially to steal your answer, the beginning of the answer starts with the client being clear about what it is they're trying to accomplish. If they're clear about what they're trying to accomplish, then we can agree on what the metrics are to be able to measure it. Mm-hmm. In this case, they said, we want to see video views. So we contracted to deliver, it was with MSN, 2 million video views. That was our base to achieve return on investment. We ultimately, over time, achieved 22 million video views, which was well above and beyond what anybody expected. And again, the thing that, although it's always connected to sales, it's kind of like they say, well, it's really not about the money. It's always about the money. It's always about moving product. And at the end of the day, we moved product, and it was easy for them to distill how that happened.
So they actually sold more Suave shampoo and they sold more Sprint. Okay, what were you going to say, Dominique?
In our business, there's only one KPI, which is sales. I mean, it could be short-term sales or long-term sales, which means that the brand asset has been worked on. But to raise another issue around another brand, which is BNP Paribas, a French bank, and they have done Roommates, which is a web series with huge success on the web, and the brand was not apparent at the beginning. And at the same time, there was some action on social networks through Facebook with nearly 500 accounts opened by these young male and female audience. And the thing is that you need to match these two worlds. Brand content has no metrics at that time, but on social networks, it's so easy to target and to measure. Mm-hmm. And it will be the same with mobile, as Apple explained us this morning. So I think that we can't work further on these issues without integrating from the early step the social graph and its strengths and the way we can absolutely measure, including coupons, rewards, incentive, and all this, because it counts for advertiser. Mm-hmm. In the French business, there is 10 billions invested on media, 20 billions invested in other forms of communication, direct marketing, yellow pages, even PR, and so on. So the goal for us, as there is some shrink in classical media investment, is really to try to seduce and convince advertisers to take some money from their direct PR action and to bring them through content and digital into a media sphere. Mm-hmm.
We talked about Into the Motherhood, and it worked on the web, as Peter has described. But when it went to TV series, it didn't actually work. So what are the pitfalls there? Because that series it just didn't work on television for a variety of reasons. What are the pitfalls to making sort of 360 content? We talk about this a lot in this business now. We want everything to work on every platform. Is that just very difficult in branded entertainment, or?
Well, it's different. It's difficult in any form of entertainment. How many great movies have you seen adapted to television series and been total thuds? It was a great movie. It was a great 2 hours, and then they adapted to a series, and it just kind of crashes and burns. I think there probably were 2 in the history of television that you can point back to, MASH being one, and the other one I can't remember. But as soon as you hand off a property that you've taken all the time and investment creatively to nurture, birth, and get to be successful, and then hand it off to another creative auspice, there's a risk that it's not going to be the same property. And truly, when you migrate from platform to platform, and when financing really dictates the necessity of another partner, then it can't be the same experience. So, would we have loved to have been able to maintain control of that asset and keep our cast together and really do it the way that we did it? Absolutely. We would have loved to have done that. But talent had contracts that we couldn't break because we couldn't continue on with them in TV because of prior existing relationships. And ABC stepped up and wrote a big check. In order to license this, produce it, they were willing to risk $25 million. Was Unilever willing to risk $25 million to do a TV show? Not a chance. They're in the business of food and home and personal care products. And they happened to have a marketing platform that actually made them a little bit of money as intellectual property. But the reason they invested in that was to solve a marketing problem. It did. It achieved its return on investment. End of story. There was no risk at all to Unilever. They weren't going to reuse the platform and use it again. They already moved on to another marketing platform. Right. So we extracted a little bit more value for them. And if we would have been lucky, we could have extracted a tremendous amount of value for them. But any time you hand it off And again, you always have to hand it off when you're taking the money. It's someone else's risk, and it becomes someone else's vision.
Bob.
You know, this is probably our biggest challenge. I mean, I can tell you, Peter, when Peter was at CBS, the only thing that matters were his ratings that week. We're doing a series called Freakonomics, and the basis theme in Freakonomics is human incentives. For those of you, I'm sure many of you have read the book, and what's going to incent you. So when you're working with a network, in most cases, the networks are not really necessarily set up for branded content because you have a programming director who's only interested in a series that will get numbers. And then you have an advertising salesperson, and again, not to put people into buckets, who's really incented on the bottom line and selling advertising. And in the old days, many of them only sold 30-second commercials. So the real challenge going forward is how do you really understand both of these processes? We joke, at our shop that when we're in a meeting, we better know more than the ad salesperson knows about programming, and more about programming than the ad salesperson. And that's really, really difficult because no matter what we say, listen, this is a lucky hit or miss business anyway, and I know there are fewer barriers to entry today than there were. But when you're using traditional media, and we do a lot of that right now with our advertisers, it is difficult in general television or in traditional media to get a hit. Certainly when you have to be watching out for a brand, and that brand's performance is not necessarily in line with the network's performance. So this is a challenge going forward. That's why I believe at the end of the day, it's got to be about what's on the screen. And as much as I care about Peter and the people with deep pockets and smart creative groups, and we work very closely with agencies as well as clients, our key client is an audience at the end of the day. And if we forget that, we're dead. This business is dead if that happens.
Doug, when you look at, you're in the creative side. When you look at where your budgets come from, I mean, is it sometimes difficult to actually figure out how to get the budgets because you're sort of fighting with the agencies, or does it work because you're more on the creative side? I mean, how does that work? Where do you actually sit in the food chain?
In the food chain, we in some cases we're a small fish, and in other cases, we're a medium-sized fish. Never the large fish like Group M, but we have our place in the pecking system. The budgets are interesting, and I think that really what it all comes down to is economics. It's been said here a few times. How do we get more value for less money? We have this theory that a dollar in media is disposable and a dollar in content is distributable. And how do you create an asset that is distributable that a brand can continue to realize value from? This idea of working content and how that story works for you. One of the ways that we've been most successful with our clients is really looking at things from an integrated team approach. So at that table, to the best of our ability, is the media agency, is the PR agency, is the promotions agency, is the retail activations agency. If it's a B2B client, we're trying to look at more of the corp comm side. And how do we organize all those buckets of money together, pointing towards one story or one platform that then has a larger budget, and then for that matter can be activated at a much larger scale. To the example that Bob gave on the P&A side, that same challenge that the studios have advertising or opening a film, the networks are struggling in terms of keeping awareness around their shows. And there's not a network out there that wouldn't love to have some off-air promotional money. And for any of our clients to be able to activate that at retail or activate that at a car dealership or activate that digitally through a set of customers, that has value, and that has to play into that overall equation as well in terms of structuring these deals. So, we're finding more and more of our dollars are being moved from column A, ad production, to column B, content production. It is a pocket shift. The pie is not getting larger, but hopefully the value that's being created for the client is exponential to the investment. So we're seeing clients come back with line items in their budget the following year, which is significantly more than the past, and more renewals year over year than we've seen in the past.
Marcus, are you seeing that too? I mean, are the brands getting more interested in this area? I mean,
yeah, I think so. We're seeing projects funded from several sources. Occasionally there will be an innovation pot which sits there. Depending on which pot project is funded from, it will receive a different set of measurement criteria. Certainly, analytics and measurement are really, really important to us moving forward. You know, projects do have to validate their existence. If I'm coming from a media spend, then it's increasingly difficult. I'm going to be benchmarked apples for apples against return on investment. It's a very loose argument to say, well, we've got return on engagement. Unless we can manifest that through very active and relevant distribution paths, I can hit high audiences, but at the end of the day, if it's a product service organization, it's sales, conversion, you know, looking at new prospects. So we have to be measured.
Is there, and this is anybody, is there a culture clash still with the television business, working with them with brands? I mean, where do you think the big hurdles are with working with, you know, a lot of the people that are in here, either people that have channels or platforms? What, you know, is there still a culture clash? Is there a languaging issue? Peter, what do you think? I mean, where are the hurdles to making this work with, you know, the people that are in this room?
Well, again, I think, you know, it's funny when friends of mine who have been in the business on the content side, either as producers or networks, found that I was working with Group M and with the agency world, they thought, wow, you know, like you crossed over into the pot of gold, you know, you're working for clients. And I said, you know, it's kind of like the only people who think that that's really a sexy business are people who aren't in it. It's a tough game. Clients have incredibly high standards. They increasingly want more and more value for less and less remuneration. That's just the fact. And they are used to exercising a tremendous amount of control. It's why a 30-second spot costs as much as a 90-minute movie. I mean, that's budget to budget in terms of when I was a programmer to what I've looked at in terms of commercial budgets. And it's not a mystery. It's because of how cumbersome the process is, because of the level of control that the clients feel that they must exercise. And at the end of the day, they're telling a story about themselves, about their product. This is an entirely new world for them. And they have the same expectations about delivery of value. They have the same concerns about control. And into that world now we have producers who are trying to do what they do, which is deliver a quality product, and as Bobby was saying, programmers who are trying to do what they do, which is deliver rating points. And again, trying to align those interests so that they all really, really work well takes more than just luck. It takes some exercisable skill that the people on this panel all to one degree or another add value by performing. So, you know, again, I think that they are very, very different worlds. And as different as they are today, as I said to you before, they're going to be different again tomorrow. This is all in motion. This is all very, very organic. And we're just going to have to be, you know, very, very quick on our feet.
You know, I think it really is a process. And, you know, it goes back to your original question about our relationship with Fremantle. They recognize how important it was for us to manage and maintain a culture where the process of how you create this with a client occurs. And, you know, it's sort of funny because I remember this morning you were asking me what did I think were some of the best examples of branded content. And after I reeled off all of ours, which I had to do, I said it's kind of, there's an irony that the best examples of branded content are on pay TV, in my opinion. The development of Monello Blahnik, a movie, you know, with someone who was here today visiting for another show, the development of a new drink, the Cosmopolitan. So it's kind of interesting about the way in which some of the greatest branded content has evolved. So it really is that question of almost storytelling, as much as it is just aligning a brand with a product.
Cameron, how do you set brand expectations? You gave a really interesting presentation this morning about, it was American Family Insurance, and you created something called In Gale We Trust, which was, you know, sort of a sitcom, I guess you'd call it. How do you manage brand expectations for what's actually going to happen when they put money towards something like that?
Very carefully, very low. No, I mean, I think for us, the success metrics that we talk about with a brand like that or any of the other brands we've talked about are sort of three major buckets. Are we able to get it to scale? So can we actually get viewership against it? But let's not do that to trade off for the second success metric, which is, are we actually able to sell product, move the needle on purchase intent, consideration, all of those traditional brand metrics. So it's no good if 300 million people saw the show and nobody picked up the phone to call or the register didn't ring. So I think it's a combination of those. So I don't think any of us knows the right combination or what factor we put against a qualified view on one platform over another. I think that's something we'll continue to evolve over the next 12 to 18 months. And then I think the third is, as we've all said, it's just, did the content resonate with the viewer? Because if you've screwed up the content, you won't get the scale and you won't get the brand impact. And so did we put content first? Did we put the viewer first? Did we protect the dialogue we're allowed to have with that viewer on our multiple platforms? Has to be at the forefront of all of it. So it's quality of content, brand metrics, and then scale is where that conversation starts, and that will dial up and down with different brands. It was different for Sprint and Swaffer in the motherhood, different for Samsung, who we just launched a show with a couple of weeks ago. So, but those are the three buckets we talk in at least.
Anybody else want to come in on that? Managing brand expectations.
We need great clients, and that's the point. Every single great achievement that we have seen this morning was probably led by CMO or CEO that absolutely believe that their brand needs to move forward and that they were okay for taking risk around. And I think that's one of the points. And for all the indie companies, broadcaster, producer that knock on the door in very silo organization like agencies or broadcasters, it's sometimes a bit vain and frustrating because it's so hard to scale that trend. Since 5 years, brand content is coming, content like mobile media is coming. Okay, but when is going to be a real big thing and not a potential big thing? And that scale problem is due to organization, but also the involvement and the conviction we can share with clients. So it's a conviction business, a talent people business, and we still have a very strong duty to train our troops and to engage them in such program because it's time consuming. The earnings are not so great. So and when you're on the hot seat like a CMO, better buy some ad space instead of having a backlash if your product doesn't meet the audience or the sale. So it's not so easy.
It's safer that way. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, again, in my introduction, I said everything we do is really to bring benefit to our clients and create client advantage. And the founding of all of these organizations inside what look to be unlikely places like media agencies, advertising agencies, digital studios, are really all about trying to deliver a higher level of service and a higher level of benefit to clients because ultimately they're the lifeblood of our business. We're an advertiser-supported medium. So what we've needed to do, again, my group exists because the people at the media agency at Group M and the individual agency said, okay, so we know planning and buying. We know how to have that conversation. We have those skills. But if we're going to really be able to provide a higher level of service to our clients that really relates to how media is used and how it's expressed through content, then we better bring in people who have that skill and who can integrate that skill with what we do so that together we can help educate our clients and then deliver to our clients on the basis of what information we've given them. So all of this is really physical evidence of the evolution of the business, that there are different skills being brought together with the core competencies that we all started with as funding, distribution, and content creation to try to, again, increase the level of value that we create.
Okay. Let's see if there's some questions from the audience. Can we bring up the light so I can see what's going on? Does someone want to ask a question? This is a panel that has a lot of knowledge. So if there's a question you have, there's one there. If there's anybody else, that's good. That we can go here next. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yesterday, I attended a conference regarding the production of the Pillars of the Earth, and I was surprised to hear from the producers when they told us about the 4 forms for financing that huge production. Branding, sponsoring was not one of them. And so I don't know why there's still this lack between the producers and, the agency. How is it possible these days when we hear for so long about branded content, how is it possible to produce a huge TV production like that without considering brand sponsorship?
Okay.
Well,
Peter?
I'll jump into that one. First, again, Pillars is something that is a period piece. So again, contemporary brands finding an organic way to be part of a period piece is, I think, in this case, was an insurmountable challenge. Secondly, I think you're dealing with expectations with regard to what it takes to be able to finance a production like that and deliver a production like that with regard to what brand objectives are like. Brand managers, all the way up to the CMO level, have challenges that have a ticking clock. And Rolla Bauer, who did that show, it took a long time for her to gestate that, to ultimately deliver it. So someone who thought that was a good idea and might have bought into it at the time that she was initially pitching it might have been completely in a different plan, in a different cycle, and in a different job by the time that thing was delivered. So that's another significant issue for brands. And I think, you know, the third thing is with regard to those kinds of things, they're financed on the basis of a number of different high-value partnerships that have to do with soft money and hard money, but again is based on the very, very direct intellectual property, you know, monetization business. And again, brands have a part to play in that in the end of the value chain still, you know, very significantly. But I don't think a program like that could exist if it was relying on brand funding at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you take an example, we produced the pilot for Mad Men. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, more of you in this room probably know this market, but I can tell you, if you're going to produce something for $2.5 million, and in the first cycle of international, let's just assume there's a $900 million deficit. This was a project that was on AMC in the United States at first. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say in retrospect that this project would work, but at the time, this was a project that certainly made sense for the DNA of a brand to be integrated in. It was, period. No one at that time believed us that it was a project that really was as true today as it was, you know, 20 years ago. Yet, you have to make some financial decisions. And there the question is, do you produce the same project for less money, or do you find partners who buy in? Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of ways to buy in. And there's an example of a series where we did not provide the deficit, and Lionsgate has done a great job in terms of integrating brands in this. So the real question is, the economics, as Peter says, what is it? And if that had been something, which it was, that was for AMC, no different in the United States than Project Runway was for Bravo, or I'm proud to say Iconoclast was for the Sundance Channel, in terms of really defining that network. You know, we're working on a show right now with Harpo and Oprah. That's a piece of branded content, but it has no advertisers involved. And the brand is Oprah Winfrey for the launch of a new network. So I think that we have to really expand, you know, even this concept of branded content if we're going to attract the kind of talent to work on this that we really want to, on both sides of the equation.
Anyone else want to pitch in on that? No? Okay. This man here, yes? Who are you?
I'm John Bessai, and I just wanted to pick up on exactly what Robert was saying about expanding on the concept of you said branded content, I think, but branded entertainment. And because what Doug had said about us becoming channel agnostic, technology, I think, is facilitating this, but ultimately, I think it's fair to say that things still need to be marketed. I mean, there's an old system that's still there that just needs to be serviced. So I guess I really am interested in a little more information about this thing about the control, the actual, even the editorial or the ethical question around the ethics that come up. It's not necessarily a business question, but an ethical question about where the line actually gets drawn, and how in this new system, there can be sort of like almost like an editorial position taken when in fact, like a lot of who's financing a lot of the talent and the great things that people want to watch, it may be perceived in certain instances that there's a conflict of interest. So I just was wondering if
ethics of the...
Yeah, I think it's ethics. It's not a lot of business people define ethics in different ways, but I think it's more like if in the companies that are before us, how do they make these decisions? Because I'm not sure, is it like an advertising policy sort of idea, or
okay.
I don't know.
I think I sort of understand. Somebody want to jump in on that,
what
Doug?
What you're trying to get at is sort of the editorial integrity relative to a brand, or for that matter, a producer. And you give two producers the same script with the same budget, you're going to get two different films. I mean, I think the same holds true for all the groups up here relative to the agencies. That each of us is going to approach brand entertainment and the actual integration of placement at a different level. I can tell you from our perspective that placement is a tactic, brand integration is a tactic. It's part of a bigger system to create the connectivity between a brand and a character, or the brand and a franchise. and create some cultural currency out there that's going to make it relevant for people to want to buy the product or to want to aspire to be like a character, which embodies a product. Going back to the Manola Blahnik, Sex in the City, I want to be like Carrie, right? That's a really cool New York lifestyle. I want to dress like her. I want to wear what she wears, drink what she wears, or drinks what she drinks, etc. And
Drink what you about you,
okay, Bob will
How
hold
much
that
do you
till
know
later.
about Sarah Jessica
but
Parker?
I think it's a really important issue that needs to be closely managed. And today's consumer knows when they're being marketed to. David Ogilvy once said, "The consumer's not a moron; she's your wife." And that today really holds true because every consumer out there understands where there is difference between editorial and where there's difference between advertising, and it's not an even balance. If you wanted to look at how that scale tips, it's got to be entertainment first, because if it's not entertainment first and it's not delivering on what entertainment's true purpose is, which is to escape reality, not reality TV, but reality, right? One would want to ensure that you're being pure in terms of that storytelling. How that brand plays into it needs to add to the experience and make that experience more real and better for the audience, or else it fails for both sides of that equation.
Does someone else? Cameron?
I was just going to say practically, if you wanted a practical answer, when you do something on an owned network that you don't own, though there are very different kinds of deals, as everyone knows. You can do a deal where you're financing and client supplying the product. You can do one where you're keeping half of the barter, whatever the case may be, and in most cases, TV for this room. The bottom line is it's network approved or not. And we can pretend all we want that at the end of the day, someone else is having that approval. The days of going to a network and buying an hour of time, in the traditional sense of buying it, are over. There are 4 women's cable networks, and the difference between Oxygen and Lifetime and how that network is positioned is very, very subtle as the difference is on a supermarket shelf. We are in the supermarket business, and there are a lot of brands on that shelf.
But
Cameron.
Yes, but practically it's also really, really damn hard, right? Because my financier is also spending, fill in a number in terms of media dollars with me as the producer, and I'm both the network and I'm the studio on the project. Yet I do have final say-so because I do own the platform, but I don't want to go against the wishes of somebody who's spending tens of millions of dollars with us. I came off a project that almost killed me, where I had an agency turn down, this will kill people in the room probably, 81 studio-approved choices for our lead actress without a note. And I mean, but that's the agency. That's the agency. They're funding it. We have to get through that. We have to. The learning being, we have to get into it with the right running rules and knowing where those divisions of labor are, where those approval processes are, or we will literally grind to a halt on a production. And I think that's one of the new rules that we all need to go into this with. That there isn't a rule book, there is no playbook for right now, and it could be crippling if we don't discuss that up front.
Peter, do you have something to add to that?
Even when you're not working with a broadcast network or a cable network partner, even when you're in the wild, wild world of digital media, where you can basically be your own network and you can basically engage with a partner, an aggregator, to deliver an audience to what you're trying to produce. As a brand, you know you have to walk a line. A brand has to both provoke and at the same time engage and encourage and sustain a relationship. And it's a really, really tricky line. But ultimately, that's what great creative ideas do. Great creative ideas manage to walk along that edge of that cliff and not fall off. And there are risks always involved when you're dealing with creative ideas, because there is no such thing as predictive research. You can focus group things from now until the cows come home, and you're not going to know how it's going to play until it plays. Because people don't know what they like until they see it, and they don't choose to see it in a free environment until they make that choice. So you can force them in a room and get them to react, but it doesn't mean that they're going to choose to look at it and then choose to react to it in the exact same way. So it's part of the magic of the business. It's part of the reason why I got into it, and I think most of the guys here got into it, and maybe most of you got into it, because it's not knowable. But what we're all engaged in together is the art of storytelling. That's it. Whether it's a fictional story or a factual story, it's storytelling. And a story well told doesn't pop the bubble. It doesn't take you out of it at a moment. It doesn't cause you to stop believing in the narrative. It doesn't cause you to no longer really be interested. It keeps challenging you to want to know what comes next. And collectively, that's the challenge that we need to do, is engage together as storytellers to not bump the narrative, but to encourage it so that people keep their level of curiosity and always want to know what happens next.
Cool. All right, we have this man over here, and then we're going to go to this lady over here. So you first, sir.
Thank you. You mentioned that there are new measurement instruments and there are new metrics for measuring the effectiveness of the company. You mentioned that there were a number of views of the video that you used to play. The question is, what are the instruments that you would use to measure the social buzz, the buzz in the social networks for the branded content that you create? And how do you take the feedback that you find in these social networks from the audience, because you get the feedback? Do you implement it? How do you take it?
Okay. Dominique, you want to try with that one?
We move in a digital space where there are some digital lockers already. Google has locked the search, Apple is trying to lock the content, and Facebook has locked the social. And that's it. So it's not so easy to have more information than they've got because they have black box. For instance, Facebook can put some dashboards and give access to them to clients directly or more often through their agencies. And through that dashboard, you can absolutely target what you want. And you know exactly what's going on. It's going to be the same with Apple and Hi-Hat. You know that the launching has been made in the US 1st July. Now Apple is presenting 21% market share in the mobile advertising business, the same level as Google 3 months after the launch. It's absolutely amazing. And they know exactly what you are, who you are, what you like, what you dislike. They own 150 million credit card numbers. They know among the 10 types of TV show, 27 types of music choices and genre. They know exactly what kinds of app among the 10 different folders you like and you download and how long you spend time on them. So they know exactly who you are. So for the launching, it was a 1 million deal, and some brands like Nissan this morning or Citi, the bank, have followed the way. It's going to be released this year and this December in Europe. And these digital lockers can provide these figures. Our fight and battle, it's a new battlefield for agencies, is to be part of the game and to try to put added value in analytics in order not to be disintermediate. But I'm absolutely convinced that our job is still relevant to provide some metric that will be directly linked to sales and effectiveness for these companies, for which 85% of media investment remains classical, traditional TV, print, outdoor, radio, or even display digital. So I think that this relevancy is about to be, and that big digital global player will help to accelerate the path.
Anyone else about that? No? Okay. There's a question over here, I believe. Yes?
Yes, I'm working on a transmedia sci-fi project, and I just wondered whether or not we're interested in approaching brands to see if it can be entirely brand sponsored. What lessons or what mistakes do content producers have when they approach agencies and brands in their approach? What mistakes do they generally make when they approach brands and try and win them over to get the production finance to make projects like that?
Okay, so how do you get your pitch right? Yeah, who wants to
we,
take that?
We've been involved with Comcast, with FearNet, on the development of a project like that. And it was an interesting project. It was with someone, as a matter of fact, because obviously I don't have to tell you the genre delivers 12 to 24-year-olds. It's very core. There are a bunch of networks that are out there. It's always done well. In the movie business, I was doing Freddy Krueger in the early days of New Line. It's tricky because I think the play today would be to get it picked up in more than one medium, and the kind of development money that you're getting from at least the end users is not significant enough. So I think, to be perfectly frank, what we've done is we actually targeted a number of brands that really cared about this young adult audience, under the assumption that what we were doing might be as important off the air as it is on the air. whether that be in licensing or in merchandising or something else. Because the outlets, it's a very tricky situation with these young adult sorts of franchises. The only recommendation I would say is, and we consider ourselves, and we refer to ourselves as a transmedia company, so it's funny that you would say that, is that to develop a franchise and to develop this new brand that might work in a bunch of different foundation media. I think a lot of the new media at the end of the day, because of the demo, will probably be a lot more efficient and first movers than some of the traditional media.
Any other advice on how to make your pitch work? Marcus?
Yeah, I think a lot of producers make the mistake that when they come and talk to a brand, they assume naturally that will be kind of base, bottom line equity funding, which is very, very clumsy. I would encourage producers to think about the value exchange. On the brand side, there's so much to offer. So think about how you can facilitate that. Think about how the brand can benefit from your distribution path and vice versa. So it's a two-way exchange.
And Cameron?
We did a 50-episode, half live action, half animation sci-fi project with 5 presenting brands. It was the hardest yet most rewarding brand integration project we did to try and fit current day brands into sci-fi genre. And I think where it went best is when we brought the writers together with literally geeky engineers from Intel and locked them in a room for hours on end. And they created something better together based on the brand insights and the story arc that we as producers could never have created without them. So bring them in and don't pretend like you know what it was what we learned in that genre.
Get the real creatives in there, right, from the ground floor. All right, is there any questions? Any more questions? One more? No? Nothing? One there? You again? No, not about ethics, though. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, I'm kidding you. Go ahead.
So when it comes to new pilots, I think that's very interesting. I mean, it's fantastic to have somebody who is involved with Mad Men at that stage. I just think Mad Men is one of the most fantastic shows that I've ever seen anyway. But in that using that as maybe a good example, and maybe that is the example. How could a brand be involved in brainstorming a pilot, say?
Well, that was probably a case where the DNA of a number of brands could have really, not only on the promotion side, done initially in the pilot stage what it was doing now. And as I said, we actually made the rounds, and it was interesting. We made the rounds to a lot of the holding companies and agencies, and whereas we had a lot of supporters, remember they've been in business with television networks for a long time, and nothing period could work, and now we're hearing there's too much period stuff out there, so the next set of pilots we're doing can't be period.
Yeah.
Listen, this is a business that is full of humans, and on the one hand, in the nonfiction area, you want to create the second venture of something, and on the other hand, you want it to be the first ever. The people you're developing this with at networks are really the gatekeepers. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about digital media, is there are really no barriers to entry. And we're still going to have to live with that. The advertisers at the time, it was just a very new thing for them. And certainly the BMW integrations and the other stuff that's been going on recently is just amazing. It really talked to the potential set.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've run out of time, so I'm gonna end it here. But could you please join me in thanking our illustrious panel? We had Marcus Vinton, Peter Tortorici, Doug Scott, Bob Friedman, Dominique Delport, and Cameron Deed. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming.